now it's time to take this drawing that we've made in SketchUp and bring it over to Vcarve Pro. Again, I'm going to do one final check. I'm just going to click on all these parts to make sure that they come through as components, because SketchUp parts that are components will get disassembled when it comes to Vcarve, and if they are merged together or they're not all components, it'll come in as one big clump, and we just have no way of machining that in Vcarve Pro. So a couple steps here that are super important. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to say File, Save As, and I'm just going to save this in my downloads because I don't want to have this on my actual computer. If I was you, I would put this in your network drive. So I'm going to call this Titus cabinet in my downloads, and it's really important that we save it as an older version. For whatever reason, Vcarve Pro, even though we keep getting the new versions that come out, it likes to have older versions of SketchUp. So we like to be at least a year or two old, and 2018 I know is going to work. So I'm going to save the Titus cabinet as a 2018 SketchUp version, and I'm going to save. And then I'm all done in SketchUp, and I can open up Vcarve Pro. Right now, the current version is 10.5, but depending on when you watch this, that may change, and it likely will change. But even versions, I think we started in version 8, they all look the same. There's very few differences. They just get smoother running. So this should last for quite a while. I'm going to go create a new file. And when I get to create a new file, this looks just like the things that you've done already. We need to set this up correctly. So I'm going to go 48 inches wide and 96 inches tall. This is a whole sheet of material. Now, it depends on where we have room on the sheet to get your parts drawn. We may move the XY0 with the actual CNC router, but we're going to just plan to put this in the bottom left corner, and we're going to have our 0 position be the machine bed, our XY datum position be the bottom left, and this is the other thing we've got to change. Our material is 5/8 thick, or 0.625, and then hit OK. So all of that is very similar to what you've already done using SketchUp in the past. Now here's the new step. You come up here, and we're going to say Import Vectors. And we are going to go to, I saved mine in Downloads. You probably put yours in your network folder. So I'm going to click on Titus Cabinet, and I'm going to say Open. Now I get this here. I'll move my face down so we can see. There's some things on here that are really important to pay attention to. Largest face on top, I like that. We may have to re-import things if they don't come, but what this says is most of the stuff with the information should be up. So that means the stuff with the line bores should be up. Gap between parts is 5/8 of an inch. We use a 3/8 router bit, and so we can run this all the way down to a 1/2 inch if we want, but 5/8 is okay. It can be an inch. It really doesn't matter. We can move all this stuff. SketchUp doesn't do arcs. It does tiny little line segments. So if you zoom way in on a SketchUp drawing that has a circle, you'll actually see tiny little line segments. And so Vcarve knows that, and it's going to refit arcs to boundaries. So it's going to take anything in SketchUp that's got a bunch of little line segments and make an arc out of it. Don't replace outer boundary. If we were just cutting out circles or rectangles or something like that, we could do that, but we're not going to do that. Import all visible data in File and hit OK. So now everything came in. Now everything came in purple. Now this is a white sheet of melamine, so there's no grain direction that we have to worry about. When I click on this, all of the parts should be separate, but if they're not, sometimes the way this will get imported is I'll click on it and it'll select every single part. So if that happens, you'll just ungroup it, and I can see it's happening here with this one. So I'll have to do this. I click on it, and I'm going to say Ungroup Object back to original object layers. Now each of these parts are able to get edited with different tool paths. So it looks like I'm going to have to do that for any job that, or any piece that has more than one chunk on it. All right. I'm also going to have to, I need to have up this diagram. You can download it, print it. I'll print off hard copies if you'd like. But we need to get to this because this is going to tell us the depths that these holes need to get drilled. you'll notice that when we bring things into Vcarve, it all becomes two-dimensional. So even though we put depths on these things for the SketchUp drawing to make sense, when it comes into Vcarve, it gets flattened out and we don't have anything to do with depths. So we always like to cut and work from the inside out on a project. And I'll start with the easy stuff. So these line bores right here, I'm going to highlight these and I'm going to highlight these. So I'm holding down Shift to highlight all those at the same time. Then I come up here to toolpaths and I'm going to select this drilling toolpath right here. And when I have the drilling toolpath selected, it's going to ask me what tool do I want to use. And we're going to have, we have a 5mm drill bit, even though this is a 1/4 inch hole. SketchUp, Vcarve, none of them care. The CNC machine doesn't care. It'll cut whatever bit that we put in there. And the nice thing about this drilling tool path is it references the center of the hole. So these holes could be 2 inches wide that we drew in SketchUp, but if we put a 5mm drill bit in, the CNC router is just going to find the center of the hole and drill it how deep we tell it to drill. So I'm going to come up here, hit select, and if I want to, I can hit this button here, 90-degree drill bit that's in tool 3. If you don't have it, you can create it. Again, it's not that big a deal. So we'll create one together. We're going to edit this. We're going to call this a drill bit. It is 5mm. And we'll just call it line bore. And we'll say OK. Tool type is a drill bit. Units, millimeters. Diameter 5. It's actually, yeah, we'll leave that fine. Number of two, create settings, and all of this is okay. I'm not super concerned about any of it. We just need to know that it is in tool number 3. So we'll say apply, then I'll select it. Come back here to tool paths. Peck drilling means it's going to go down, come out, go down, come out, go down, come out. We don't need it to do that. It's not drilling super deep holes. Our cut depth is 0.4. That's just a little bit deeper than it needs to be, but because the bottom, our drill bit's not flat, it's got a point at the bottom of it, we need to go a little bit deeper so the actual usable diameter is correct. We don't need to dwell at the bottom of each pass, and we'll just call it drill 1, and I'll hit calculate. So the red line is drilling tool path. Each tool path has a different color. If I want to preview visible tool paths, you can see it drills holes, not all the way through. We shouldn't see daylight through there. So we're going to close that and come back to our 2D view. All right, we got those holes taken care of. Now we're going to switch to probably, we're going to try it with a 3/8 bit to drill these holes. We want to do as few tool changes as possible because it makes the program cut much quicker. So I'm going to select all of these holes. Again, I'm going to hold down Shift. Make sure that they turn pink from red. Really wish it was different colors, but I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to drill these out as a pocket tool path. So the cut depth for these need to be 10mm. So if I don't know what 10mm, this is where I'll have to do a little bit of conversion. It's about 0.4 inches. So that's where we got 0.4 from. If they go a little bit deep, it's not a problem. So we're going to say 0.4 inches. We got the right end mill in. Mine is just a little bit less than 3/8, but we can use the 3/8 end mill. The reason I do a smaller one is as a tool gets used up, it actually gets smaller as the edges get dull. And so when we're cutting things like dados, and we'll do this on the next project, we actually lie to the CNC router and we tell it that the bit is a little bit smaller to overcut our dados, but we don't need to worry about that today because we're not overcutting any dados. So I'm going to select my end mill, passed up to 0.8, that'll cut all the way through, spindle speed, feed rate, tool number, that's perfect. And I just need to make sure I remove that so I don't have two of them going. Ran plunge moves. That's good. And we're going to call this small holes and calculate. So I get this error message. that says 3/8 bit won't fit in there. So I say okay. So I've got to come back here to small holes, open this up, remove this, and I have got to go with my 1/4" end mill, which is in pocket or tool number 2. You can create this if you don't have it. Feed rate 18,000. Feed rate, that's perfect. Pass step, that's great. That's great. All that's good. Select. It's going to do it in 2 passes. That's fine. Ramp plunge move for 1 inch, and then hit calculate. And if I want to, I will preview all tool paths, and I see I got those holes in there now. So the geometry of the 3/8 bit just didn't work. So we have an extra tool change in there, which is fine. These are called rabbets. This hides the back from the side. And because we're using a round cutter head, we just have to make these rabbets a little bit longer. Because if I have a round tool, I don't want them to be touching. I can always zoom in. If I've got a round tool cut path and I stop right here, I'm going to have little fillets or little radiuses left in the corners, and I don't want that. If you're having trouble adjusting the size of your rabbets, like if you click on the square, or if you click on the rectangle and it selects the whole thing, that's okay. Sometimes SketchUp gets funny too, and it will put extra rectangles in here. So when I click on this, it selects the outside, which is good. But every once in a while, you'll see that red line come to the inside here, and it will select inside because there's an extra rectangle there. So it would look kind of like this. I'll just draw one in there so you guys can see it. You don't have to do this. So sometimes this will happen. When I click on here, the actual pink line that's being selected is inside the rabbet. Now the problem with this is if I use my 3/8 bit to cut this all the way out, it's going to cut the rabbet off of my project. So if you see this happening, you can click on that line and hit delete. Okay, so now I'm ready to cut my rabbets. So I'm going to select here, and I'm going to select here. I'm going to close this, do a pocket tool path, and I'm going to have my rabbet cut. We have half of 5/8, which is 5/16. If you don't know the decimal for 5/16, I don't remember it either. 0.3125. So we're going to cut it 0.3125. And we're going to go back to the 3/8 end mill. Select that. And we'll see, we may have to, if this lets us cut a little bit extra, I think we'll work. This one will work just fine. We're going to call this rabbet. Ramp plunge moves 1 inch. I forgot to put the inch in there and then calculate. Okay, that's perfect. So again, that's not cutting all the way through. We should be good to go there. So if I turn on my tool path so far, I can see I've got the holes done, the little holes, and these. I think the next step is to cut out these circles. So these circles, we want to make sure that it cuts out the whole pink line. Boom, boom, boom. I'm holding down Shift to keep them all selected. Tool pass, we'll do a, whoops, not a profile tool path, because we want to buzz all of the lumber out of there. Cut depth, we'll go back and look at here. Those are 9, we'll cut a 10 millimeter deep pocket for that. So the actual thing is 9.5 millimeters, but we'll cut it 10 millimeters deep just to give ourselves a little bit of margin. 10 millimeters, we said, is about 0.4 inches. We'll use that end mill, that's 3/8. That's perfect. 1 pass, ramp plunge moves, and we're going to call this big holes. The more tool paths we get, the more we want to label those so we know what they are. So we check that out. I'm going to preview the tool path. And we got the 4 holes, and they are bigger. So that's good. We're running out of things to cut here. So now I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to do these profiles. So make sure once in a while you'll see when you select this, and that's what I'm having happening here, is it is cutting inside here. So when I click, I can see it turn purple inside of here. Now that's a problem. We don't want to do that because when we cut this out, it'll take the 3/8 router bit, boom, and cut out the hole that we just made. So if you can zoom in far enough and you can see that you've got a rectangle in here, I guess that's not going to help me either. So we're kind of stuck at this point drawing a new rectangle. So I am going to take this, and it just dumps a rectangle in there. If I wanted to, I could get picky with the size, but SketchUp or Vcarve is so nice, these just snap right to the sizes that they should be. And I'm going to hit Control C, Control V, so I copied it, and I'm going to put one down there as well. So now I have a new rectangle laying on top of that. It's not cutting that circle out. So I'm going to select that one. I'm going to select this one, making sure that it's not cutting out that inside circle. I'm going to cut this guy out. When I cut this out, I'm making sure that it's going to cut the outside. So that dashed line should go through that. That looks good. This looks good. That looks good. So now I'm cutting out the outsides. Oh, and I may have to select them again. Okay, they stayed selected. Good. So my cut depth, 0.625 won't cut all the way through. 0.625 will cut to the millimeter. So we want to go cut 0.63. So we're cutting 5/1000ths of an inch through. We're going to switch to our 3/8 end mill. All of this stuff should be saved. And we want to cut on the outside because we want to preserve the size of these pieces. We don't need tabs. 1-inch ramps, and we're going to call this the outside cut, and we're going to calculate it. It's going to give me a warning that, it's going to cut all the way through, which is what we want it to do. And then we're going to come back up here, preview all tool paths. All right, so we're cutting all the way through, and notice it's cutting out and making just a little tiny flat spot on those pieces, which is perfect. Cutting all the way through there, cutting all the way through there. Those look awesome. All right, so now I would definitely save this. You just put a ton of work into this. I'm going to save this in my network drive because I don't want to lose it, and I'm going to find the CNC class. And I'm going to save that. Okay, now run this preview so we can see what's happening. And a couple things that you're going to want to look for is up here, really common, that we accidentally cut all the way through here. We want to see that there is still wood left there. That way those Titus connectors work. And so what I'm going to have you turn in for a grade on this project is we're going to get this to a window so we can see it. And actually, I don't really care about that. We're going to say export PDF. Export this PDF, save it someplace that you'll remember. I'm just going to put it again in downloads. And I'm going to go look at that real quick so we can see what it should look like. Whoopsie. There we go. So this is what I want to see. And I'm not super concerned where it's laid out on the page. We'll move that around, but I want to be able to see all these parts and these lines that you got in there. So you'll turn this part in for a grade. And then, well, actually, I'll grade the actual project that gets built. So we'll be able to see this. Really double check this. There's a lot of parts that could go wrong here. And I want to be careful. So we want to rearrange this so it fits a little better on our page. One thing that we don't have to worry about is grain direction. So I'm going to do this, and I want kind of everybody to get a third of a sheet. But if I hold down Control and hit 9, I can rotate that so it goes this way. And we'll see what the best way to do this is. We just want to use all of our materials up very well. Oops, daisy, I didn't select everything. So stuff was moving where it shouldn't move. So now I've moved things. So if I turn on my tool paths, they're not in the right spot. So I right click here and say recalculate all, and it moves them, giving me a warning that it's going to cut through material, which is fine. But now everything's back in the right spot. Tool paths are there. I just don't like seeing the tool paths on. They confuse me. So now if I am going to cut out more people, you don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you. So you'll easily be able to fit one more job in here. And let's see if I can get a third job. We could get almost 3 peoples out of here. So we'll play with that a little bit. I'll probably also have you turn in your Vcarve file. That way I can open it up and we can manipulate it to where it's going to fit best on the sheet that we have. So at this point, I'm just going to erase these 2 because they're in the way. I could save my files here. Now we want to do as few tool changes as possible. So make sure visible tool path to one file is selected. And start with the drill, do the small holes, and then end with rabbet, big holes, and outside cut. Notice those last 3 are done with the same end mill. We don't want to have to be changing back and forth if we don't need to. So 3 tool changes is enough. Smart Shop MN, and then we save this MMG file. I'm again just going to put it in downloads, but I want to go look at this, and you can see how many lines of code we have. So there is 700, there's a lot. There's 7,000 lines of code to do all this and all these tool changes. And so I would go file, find next. Let's go Z negative. And we don't want to go much deeper than that. That means we're cutting through. So that negative 0.127 is going to be that 5,000ths of an inch that we're cutting through. So as long as we don't see Z's that are any deeper than that, we should be fine. We're also going to say find next. Oops. We're going to say tools. And we're going to see that we are using tool 1. Tool 2 and tool 3. So just make sure that those are in the right order. So we start out with tool 3, then we go to tool 2, and then we go to tool 1. And if you can double check those things, that will eliminate a ton of our mistakes. So this is a pretty long video. You guys are going to do great. Looking forward to building this with you guys.